This morning, there are fears the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant in southern Ukraine is accelerating towards a potential disaster. After 5 days inside the plant, a report just released by a team of UN watchdog inspectors found 7 pillars of nuclear safety have been significantly compromised, including physical integrity of the plant, safety and security systems not fully functioning, and urgent concerns about an off-site power supply.
A nuclear power plant without external power supply may lose crucial functionalities, including the cooling of the reactors and the spent fuel. Without this, we could have a very serious nuclear accident.
Artillery strikes on Monday caused a fire at the plant, forcing the only working reactor to be disconnected from the grid. Ukraine and Russia have traded blame for the intense shelling around the facility.
We are playing with fire, and something very, very catastrophic could take place.
Meanwhile, a senior U.S. defense official tells NBC News Moscow is also in the process of buying millions of rockets and artillery shells from North Korea, a move the White House says shows desperation as Russia's weapons supply shortage intensifies. While UK intelligence suggests Russian morale is deteriorating. We spoke with Pavel Filatov, a former Russian paratrooper who fled. He says the Kremlin didn't tell the truth about the invasion. So for me, he said, just as for many others, the reason for this war did not correspond to my moral worldviews. And just breaking, Ukrainian energy officials say they're considering shutting the entire plant down. They believe that could be safer than having the plant run on these backup diesel generators. But look, it's a big decision because this plant gives power to some 4 million Ukrainians. Craig?
Megan Fitzgerald for us there in Kyiv. Megan, thank you.
Let me be clear. The shelling around Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant must stop. And a nuclear safety and security protection zone agreed immediately. A nuclear power plant can never be a pawn of war. Its fate must not be decided by military means. The consequences of such action are far too grave.
Russia occupied Zaporizhzhia 6 months ago. This week, Nick Schifrin and his team traveled to the nearby village of Nikopol and discovered that Russia has made the nuclear plant a combat zone.
From behind a nuclear shield, Russia strikes Nikopol's civilian targets, including what used to be Lyudmila Shashanka's apartment. She and her son Pavlo stand in the spot a Russian rocket tore through the ceiling and the walls. It stole her home and her husband. 81-year-old Anatoly was killed on the spot.
He got this apartment. He was happy because he wanted to leave something for our children. He died and left nothing for his children.
The source of the strike seen through Nikopol's haze just 6 miles away, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. A Nikopol resident provided this video, a Russian multiple-launch rocket firing from the plant. It's an almost daily barrage. That's forced more than half of the city's residents to flee. Yevgeny Sinyekhin is 30 years old.
Why are you leaving Nikopol?
We decided to leave after the shelling got close. At first we thought it was somewhere far away and didn't pay attention. But the second night, our windows were shaking.
He fled with his 6-year-old son, Nikita, who keeps his most prized possessions close, and his wife, Marina.
Do you think your son understands what's happening?
Our son understands everything. We're telling him about everything.
You said you explain everything to him. What do you mean? What do you tell him is happening?
Our son has to understand what's happening because it's his history, a part of his life. If he grows up unaware of what's happening, he'll just forget it, and the events won't leave any trace. I want him to grow up knowing how hard we fought for our freedom.
The freedom that their friend Alyona lost. She was from Berdyansk. Russian troops poured into the city on the war's 3rd week. They parked downtown and occupied. It remains under Russian control today.
A lot of soldiers came into our city. They started to kidnap everyone who refused to cooperate with the occupants. It's horrible what is happening there.
They only packed their favorite essentials so they could leave in a hurry. Desk lamps.
You've evacuated and you brought the frying pan.
We very love this post.
And what gives them comfort? A dream catcher that Marina made after the February invasion.
Have you needed the dream catcher? Have you had a lot of nightmares?
When the war began, we gathered our friends and made this with the hope it would protect us.
But they're not the only ones under siege.
Have the Russians killed anyone at the plant? Have they tortured anyone? Have they threatened anyone?
This man is one of 4,000 Ukrainian workers that continue to operate the plant, down from 11,000. He agreed to speak to us if we kept him anonymous.
Yes, there is official information about injured employees, about the victims. Some served in the armed forces of Ukraine before. Some openly demonstrated their pro-Ukrainian position. This was enough for the Russians to trap those people in the basement and torture them over several weeks.
The 500 Russian soldiers occupying the plant parked their military vehicles inside. The UN says they're blocking emergency access routes. And the worker now says the Russians are trying to provoke the remaining workers into leaving.
I think they are trying to make the plant personnel escape in order to declare publicly to the entire world that, look, Ukraine has lost control, the operators left. So they will bring their personnel and announce that they are going to guarantee security.
We met him in western Ukraine, hundreds of miles from Zaporizhia. He was evacuating with his wife, their daughter and son, and their pets. But he feels it's his duty to return to work, to help his Ukrainian colleagues who are preventing disaster.
Because there are very few people left there, and my colleagues work without days off. We must work at the plant, and we will keep working.
The head of Ukraine's nuclear authority, Energoatom, Petro Kotin, said workers at the plant destroyed documents before the Russians arrived. Since taking the plant over, the Russians damaged the outgoing power lines that help provide 1/5 of the country's electricity, and they've also destroyed the lines that provide incoming electricity that help prevent a meltdown. 5 of the plant's reactors are shut down. The 6th is still on, but only to provide the plant power.
Right now, the plant's only source of power is one of its own reactors. Is that sustainable?
It is the first time in the history this type of reactor is operated at such a moment. We are lucky that this unit is operated for such a long period of time. But again, if there will be shutdown of this unit, after that we will be relying only on diesel generators, and the reliability of these diesel generators will be in question also.
That uncertainty terrifies some nuclear experts. One with decades of experience here wanted to speak to us anonymously because he's critical of the government's response.
Ukraine is not stopping the reactor, and the question is, why are the safety conditions not being met?
Ukraine's state nuclear authority confirms to PBS NewsHour it is considering shutting down the final reactor, but only when it has reliable incoming power. This expert says that's not fast enough.
If the safe operating conditions are off, the reactor plant must be shut down.
He warns there's a real risk that the damage so far could pale in comparison to what happens when you make a nuclear plant a combat zone. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nick Schifrin in Pokrov, Ukraine.
With ongoing shelling near Europe's biggest nuclear power plant sparking widespread concern of a pending disaster, the UN nuclear watchdog on Tuesday called for the fighting to stop and for a security zone to be established at the plant, located in Russian-controlled territory along the front line of its war with Ukraine.
We are playing with fire, and something very, very catastrophic could take place.
The Zaporizhia nuclear plant, seized by Russia shortly after its invasion of Ukraine, is controlled by Russian forces, but run by Ukrainian technicians. Russia and Ukraine each accuse the other of shelling.
In Ukraine,
Rafael Grossi, head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, spoke at the United Nations on Tuesday following a report by the IAEA that called the situation unsustainable. He and other IAEA inspectors braved shelling to cross the front line and reach the power station last week.
The hits that this facility has received and that I could personally see and assess together with my experts is simply unacceptable.
Grossi said a security zone should be established immediately around the plant, something also urged by United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres.
An agreement on a demilitarized perimeter should be secured. Specifically, that would include a commitment by Russian forces to withdraw all military personnel and equipment from that perimeter, and the commitment by Ukrainian forces not to move into it.
Inspectors said they had found Russian troops and equipment at the plant, including military vehicles parked in turbine halls. Moscow has denied accusations that it used the plant as a shield for its forces, but says it has troops guarding it. The U.S. on Tuesday charged that Russia is in the process of buying millions of artillery shells and rockets from Cold War ally North Korea, and said this showed Moscow is suffering severe supply shortages in its war in Ukraine.
One overriding message, the IAEA remains gravely concerned about Zaporizhia. While the ongoing shelling has not yet triggered a nuclear emergency, it's a constant threat. The presence of inspectors at the plant appears to have done little to lessen the risks. They say they had to be evacuated to safety on Saturday after witnessing shelling firsthand. Zaporizhia is occupied by Russia, but still run by Ukrainian technicians working under high stress. And listen to this. The report states up to 40% of jobs dealing with safety are currently unstaffed, raising the possibility of human error. The team has confirmed that there are Russian soldiers and military vehicles inside the facility, and the key recommendation that a safety and security protection zone be set up immediately to prevent a radiation disaster. Nora?
The largest nuclear power plant in Europe sits directly in the line of fire. Now, the United Nations has a warning for both sides. Stand down or risk nuclear catastrophe. National security correspondent Caitlin Burke joins us with tonight's top story. Caitlin.
Tara, a team of UN inspectors braved the war zone last week to tour the Russian-occupied Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Their goal? To assess the safety situation there.
We are playing with fire, and something very, very catastrophic could take place.
Rafael Grossi, the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, told the UN Tuesday that the physical integrity of the facility has been compromised by continued shelling around the plant.
The physical attack, wittingly or unwittingly, the hits that this facility has received and that I could personally see and assess together with my experts is simply unacceptable.
Twice in just the last few weeks, the plant has been knocked offline and forced to rely on backup generators to run its safety systems. The IAEA now calling for Russia and Ukraine to immediately stop all military operations in the area and establish a nuclear safe zone. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he would support a demilitarized protection zone and adds the Russians must be forced to return full control of the plant back to Ukraine. In an exclusive interview with ABC News, Zelensky claims Russia is using the facility as a weapon.
You see, they occupied our nuclear station, 6 blocks, the biggest in the Europe. It means 6 Chernobyls. It means the biggest danger in the Europe. So they occupied it. So that means that they use nuclear weapon. That is nuclear weapon.
Zelensky says the Kremlin ultimately wants to move the plant from Ukraine's power grid to Russia's. Moscow, meanwhile, says Ukraine is responsible for putting the Zaporizhian facility at risk and wants more information on the IAEA report, saying there are a number of issues with it. 2 inspectors remain to monitor the plant's operation. Director Grossi says they will also continue to evaluate the situation there and report back to the United Nations.